Good afternoon and welcome to the Legacy After the Locker Room podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Bradham, and I am so excited to be here today with former professional soccer goalie, Jesse Bradley. Jesse, good afternoon.
Kayla, it's great to see you, and I'm thankful for sports philanthropy and everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I want to get right into this because we have so much to cover, Jesse. I'm going to cover a couple of big highlights on this podcast. We're going to talk about your sports career in the soccer world, sickness that you incurred over in Africa, the recovery for that, adoption, which you're a big advocate for, and what you're doing now, which is really amazing. And I'll let the cat out of the bag. Pastoring a church in the Seattle area. What an exciting story. Jesse, how did you get started in soccer?
You know, ever since I was 3 years old, sports was my passion. It caught my attention, my affection. I grew up at the University of Minnesota campus, and literally on that campus, our apartment was in a football stadium parking lot. And so you could hear it. I mean, it was the Golden Gophers and everybody, wearing the maroon and gold. And I'd go to the games and I'd tell my parents, this is what I want to do when I grow up. I want to play sports. So I knew that in preschool. And of course, in America, there's so many great sports that it's difficult to choose. And I played 3 sports in high school: basketball, soccer, and also baseball. But I found that basketball was my passion, but soccer was where I had the most talent. And sometimes, there's just, you play all 3 sports, but eventually if you want to keep playing, you've got to choose a certain sport and a position, and goalkeeper was a great fit for me.
Wow, very cool. So we get that part of college, but you actually played for Minnesota before they were in the MLS, right?
Yeah, that's right. So our high school team, St. Paul Academy, won 2 state championships. It was the Metrodome, 6,000 fans. So those were great memories. And then I went to Dartmouth College on the East Coast, and I had a great coach, great team. We won 2 Ivy League titles, and just keep in close touch with all of the players, just like a family. And then also, in Minnesota, I played there just before the MLS. And a couple of my teammates, Manny Lagos, Amos McGee, they now lead the Minnesota United team. And so they're involved in leadership there. But I knew I'd go overseas. And so that was always the dream. And through Bobby Clark, that opportunity, the doors open for me to play overseas as well. Soccer in America has improved so much, and the MLS is much stronger now, and it's exciting to be part of the Sounders now.
That's super cool. So it was actually when you went overseas that you first of all, let me ask you a question. You played in Scotland and in Africa, correct?
That's right. 2 very different cultures. Scotland was Aberdeen, the northern part of Scotland. And I just love the people there playing. It's rugged. Minnesota winters were cold, but Scotland's something else. You train 8 to 5 and you got the wind and the rain and the cold. And so it was an intense, a lot of kind of refining, I think, my mindset, and then also performance that on the field as well. And then Zimbabwe was in Bulawayo in the Highlanders Football Club.
Wow. And so let's talk about Zimbabwe, because you had some experiences in Zimbabwe that caused some sickness, correct?
That's right. I played a season there and I loved it. The players are so talented and skilled. And then after the season, as the season was wrapping up, I was taking a prescribed medication to prevent malaria. And that was once a week. Eventually, it built up toxic levels in my system. And the physicians in Zimbabwe were watching my health deteriorate. They were very concerned and they didn't know the cause. And so they sent me back to America while I still had the strength to make it back. Barely made it back. And then I was in bed for 8 days, but also I started to go, and we paid out of pocket to go to Stanford. And that was the first physician. He listed 10 different things. One of those was a possibility of the side effects of the drug. And when he said that, something just rang true inside of me, like, this is it. And sometimes you have to listen to your own body. And as an athlete, I mean, your body's your livelihood. You know your body pretty well. And when he described that, I just knew it. The physicians told me to keep taking the medication for another month because they didn't want me to get malaria on top of my sickness. But it actually saved my life because I told the physicians I won't take it anymore. And we had my blood sent to Center of Disease Control. They confirmed toxic levels of the drug. And the side effects were widespread. I mean, that decision right there is a prayerful decision. I think it saved my life that I said no to the doctors in that last month of the medication. But for me, the symptoms I noticed right away were sweats and chills, migraine headaches, double vision, and then my heartbeat, the arrhythmia, a racing heartbeat called tachycardia, 160 beats a minute, just sitting still. Like right now, it just take off and you can feel it's like your heart's beating out of your chest and you can't stop it because the drug inhibits the inhibitors, so it can no longer regulate itself. And then also atrial flutters, another abnormality, and heart murmur, skip beats. The left side of my chest was in pain during the day, during the night, and the cardiologist didn't know if I'd make it through all of this. And I was really fighting for my life for a year, physically on the brink, and then also emotionally. It created new experiences I had never had before, like the anxiety levels and the panic attacks and depression. There's even suicidal thoughts that would flood in. It's like, what is going on? Because before this, I was even keeled. It's like a bad drug overdose and crazy dreams. And even it was as simple as this in some ways. But if I was in a room and I could turn the lights on, I could think, reasonably clear. But then if you turn the lights off, I started to get all these images and pictures and nightmares. And it was like, that was just even during the day. So my mind was obviously very affected by the medication. Even things like driving, I just couldn't do it because of stimulation of other cars coming near. I couldn't handle it. So that gives you a picture of how severe it was. And that was also the turning point in my life in many regards. And I encourage people today who are watching and listening that your low points can actually become transformative, inspiring, and healing. That you can
Jesse,
defeat
hold
despair.
on. Say that one more time. I want everybody to hear that. Do you mind?
Yeah, I believe the low points in your life are not the end of the story, and you can defeat despair. And I believe by the grace of God, those low points can be transformative, healing, and inspiring. And those are the turning points of my life, my lowest points. Your pain can lead to your passion. And when your passion, your purpose, you discover those. I discovered, and this might speak to a lot of athletes, while I was playing, I didn't even realize it, but my identity was attached to my performance and my achievement. And I want to tell people that who you are is more important than what you do. And when I didn't have soccer there, I was struggling because it's like, well, where's my identity? Who am I without soccer and health and a career? And that's where I had to, instead of looking to all the things that can change or can go away or no longer be in my life, and soccer was one of those, playing soccer at that level, then I need to shift into what's going to be here. And for me, and I realize there's a lot of different viewers with different backgrounds and different beliefs. But for me, I was going to put my identity in God, his presence, and his love, because I felt like that is an anchor for the soul. Really, my life was rebuilt from that. And I started to do the practical things of charting for a year, how many minutes I'm able to walk. And that was very significant because if anyone's ever been sick and it's been chronic, you feel like you're not making any progress. But this way I could look back and say, 3 months ago, I could only walk 10 minutes before my heart elevated and the heart rate elevated too high. But now with strength, I can actually walk 20 minutes and my heart didn't beat too high. And so I had to celebrate those small victories. And what a shift from, celebrating championships and, a professional contract and all that, stadiums, to celebrating walking from 10 to 20 minutes. But that was the reality of my life. And I started to write down 10 things every day I'm grateful for. It was gratitude, and it was a choice, because otherwise I would focus on what I don't have. And there's a lot of people watching that's so easy probably to focus on what you don't have. And you can't go back in time. You can't relive the glory days. But instead, today, what do you still have? And then with a grateful attitude, identify that, celebrate that, build on those islands of strength. And then there's no limits when your life starts to, the rebuilding, the restoration of your life. There's no limits even after a tragedy. Sometimes I think the greatest blessings in life are not what we see coming, and they're not what we planned. And my life was going one way, and then all of a sudden it was over, and I couldn't go back. I couldn't keep going, and I had to go a new direction. And part of that was new ways of coping, because my old ways were just try harder and do better, whether it's grades, sports, friends. And I didn't have any way I could muscle through this one. It wasn't going to go away quickly. Physicians couldn't do anything really for me. I couldn't just do some form of self-help. And so that formed really a new coping response for me. And part of that was to let people in to the pain instead of being stoic or denial, to let people in, to the disappointment, and then to let God in. And I started to pray in ways that I never did before. And instead of just intellectual or theological, I'd pour out my heart to God and ask him to take the burdens. And that lightened, what I was walking through. And I just had to do that to survive, because it wasn't just white knuckle and try harder. There had to be a different way through this. And so all this was happening. It's easy to summarize it now, Kayla, or some of it, but at the time it felt chaotic and I was grasping. I mean, I was just trying to put one foot in front of the other, and it would be a couple steps forward, a step back, and then so growth wasn't linear. It wasn't like, oh, here's the cliff notes. I mean, this is messy, this is raw, and I'm just trying to figure life out in this new season where I've lost more than I've ever lost before.
And Jesse, I think that's so interesting because I think everybody can relate to that, whether it's a messy divorce, the loss of a parent, sibling, or child, losing your job. Everybody at some point needs to rebuild. And I want to talk about your process of rebuilding. Before we do, I want to remind our listeners this is the Legacy After the Locker Room podcast. I'm Kayla Bradham. We're partnered by the Sports Philanthropy Network, here today with former professional soccer goalie Jesse Bradley. Jesse, let's talk about rebuilding. You're doing some pretty amazing things, and one of them is being a pretty awesome husband and dad. Can you tell us your advocacy for adoption and how you met your wife and your beautiful story of your family?
Sure. I'm so grateful too that you're interested and you cover what happens off the field and after the career, because so often athletes have the microphone when they just scored or they've just won, or they're talking about, their team or their performance. But I think it's so important to open up, go beyond the sports and open up. What are the deep things in life? And you've got a vision for that and appreciation. And you brought so many professional athletes together. So I love that network and the importance of how much we need each other and learn from each other and lifelong learners. And then what's the next career? Because sports only last so long. And it's like, okay, what are you going to do after the sports end? And I'm also grateful for the school I went to. I'm grateful for the American system with colleges and how to be a student athlete, because I've been in Europe, I've been in Scotland, where a lot of the guys are going all out for the football or the soccer career. There you'd say football, here we'd say soccer. And then if you don't have anything set up after that, it can just be like slammed, a lot of depression. So for me, I'm grateful for my family and my wife, Lori, our 4 children. We have 3 boys and a girl. In fact, they're all very active. I can't tell if they're aging us or keeping us young, but we're trying to keep up. We go from the trampoline to backyard soccer to basketball, lots of sports today. But what I'd say about my family is personally, on a daily basis, I feel like that's one of the areas where I am learning and hopefully growing the most. And honestly, it's a role where there's no formula. So being a husband and a dad, I'm praying, I'm checking with my wife, but each day looks a little different. And sometimes I don't connect as well as I should. So sometimes I miss opportunities. And that is probably an area where I feel that need to keep growing and doing better. But my wife and I have been married for 15 years, and we just are so grateful for all 4 kids. We have 3 biological kids and 1 adopted. And I just think adoption is wonderful. And when I think about all the kids in the foster care system, I would be thrilled if, in this next generation, we didn't need a foster care system anymore, because all of those kids need a forever family. And I know my parents were divorced when I was 7. And I remember that feeling of watching mom and dad and no longer together, kind of my 2 pillars. And I remember dad leaving and I couldn't bring him back. I couldn't keep my parents together. So as a kid, you feel kind of helpless, like it's out of your control. And the thing you want the most, you can't hold together. And that loss is so significant when you lose a parent. And it's hard to describe what that means at the different phases of your life. Now, I'm grateful my dad and I are now, we get along well. And, he came to my wedding then, and I've, just a lot of holidays together, and grateful for my mom. So I'm very grateful for my parents and also my step parents. I'm very grateful, very close with all of them. And family is so important. But because of that pain, again, pain often can drive you towards purpose. And I also in the Bible read that true faith is to take care of widows and orphans. And that's what it looks like to live out your faith. So I think when it comes to adoption, it's not for everybody. It's a challenge. It can be one of the most challenging things, the most rewarding things, but there are many roles. So if you start big picture and you think, how can we get a home? How can we have a home, a forever home, a loving home for the children right now that need one? Then there's going to be a lot of roles, and some people might adopt. Some are going to mentor. Some are going to support financially. Some are going to be a friend. Some are going to pray. Some are going to organize and volunteer. Some are going to be social workers. There's so many roles. There's not a lack of roles or opportunity. It's just a lack of love and desire sometimes for us to take that next step. And what I've seen in my church is there's about 20 families that have adopted now. And then foster care, there's one family that's had over 1,000 children in their home. Over 1,000 children. And sometimes it's just for a week or two. Sometimes it's for months. Sometimes it's for a few years. But the county will bring to them the child that's been through the most traumatic situation. So some of these kids, even as a young age, emotionally, physically, sexually abused at a young age, even by age 2 and 3. Some of them been severe exposure to drug and alcohol in the womb. And they need someone to hold them and care for them. And this is one family that I think of that has just poured their life into caring for these kids, trying to help them find a forever family. So, I'm inspired by that. I see many people caring for the kids and the partnerships we have different agencies here locally and nationally and Olive Crest. And there's just great partnerships. We need to collaborate. I believe that in so many fields, we're so much better together. We're stronger together. And if we don't compete, we don't get weird and we don't get bitter and resentful, but instead we just collaborate, kind of simple, play well together. They teach you in preschool. If we collaborate, really the potential is amazing. It's staggering. It's wonderful. So what I've seen is those partnerships, they go a long way. And I love to encourage churches to also just consider how they can step into this role in their community. And sometimes it's hosting, sometimes it's using your building and opening it up so that others can have that facility to meet.
Jesse, you and I talked about this prior to taping this show, but you touched on collaboration and I shared my heart with you. You are the third pastor on Legacy After the Locker Room. So that means 3 former professional athletes, all in different leagues,
yes,
are serving in churches. So NBA, Reverend Dr. Terry Cummings out in Atlanta.
yes.
Reverend Matthew Lawrence, former Baltimore Ravens, out on the East Coast. You're out on the West Coast in Seattle. And so we have the NFL, the NBA, Major League Soccer.
Yeah.
And we're collaborating. We're breaking down these silos that exist within leagues. And my goal, my heart is to get the leagues to collaborate with each other to create hope and possibility through sports. And I want to say thank you for being on board with me for that mission, because that is so cool and there's so much power in that.
That's right. Kayla, you said it so well. It's a time to break down some of these barriers, these walls, silos. Let's end that. We need to come together. That's multi-generational. That's multicultural. That's also in terms of different sports, different parts of the country. And I love that you have that vision in your heart to bring that together, And, I never expected to be a pastor. That wasn't even on my radar when my career ended. And I grew up in a family kind of like Baskin Robbins, 31 flavors, all different, spiritually, there's Catholic, there's Jewish, rabbi, atheist, agnostic. Like I didn't believe in God. And then at Dartmouth College, I took a class, Introduction to World Religions, and just started the professor assigned the Gospel of John for the first time. And I heard about Jesus and I was curious and I asked hundreds of questions. I kicked the tires hard and I thought, okay, what is this? Is this real? Is he still in the grave? And looked at the historical evidence. And then that's when I made the decision to follow Jesus. And it was such joy on the inside, but I still didn't think I'd be a pastor. And a lot of times in life, you might be built or made or wired for something that you didn't even realize. And sometimes that pain and that tragedy or that shift is going to open your eyes and you're going to discover parts of you. And I love it when athletes spread their wings after their career. I love it when they get involved. I think sometimes for athletes, there's such a drop off after you're done playing, because there's just nothing like it still in the locker room with the teammates, winning the championship, going for the goal, the fans. And then you're like, well, what is it going to be afterwards? And some might go and be entrepreneurs, some enter the business realm, but whatever realm you're in, I encourage you to go into the realm of serving, because serving is where it's fulfilling. And as an athlete, it's easy to be focused on yourself, but after your career's over, and even during your career, hopefully it's starting and you're cultivating that, but afterwards, you can really pour yourself into some role where it's serving. So for me, it's the role of a pastor, but you can serve in every capacity. It's where you live, work, learn, or play. It's not so much about your position, your career, your title, as it is about your heart and your desire. And athletes have a great platform at the end of their careers, and don't waste that platform. And when you serve, the ripples of that are going to go far beyond what you can imagine, even overseas. Take a look around the other nations. That, the beauty of soccer being a number one sport in so many countries is I was able to go overseas and travel and play and see that. And then I saw even like I played this morning, and it's all different nations coming together. That's the beauty of sports. Sports like a metaphor for life, and you come together. So what we have on the soccer field, that kind of unity, and let's have that off the field as well, and just start to serve people, even in other nations, see what the needs are. And I really believe there's no limits. We live in such a time right now where people, through whether it's empowered by voice or video, podcasts, being able to make a difference, and we're connected in the nations more than ever. So I'm fired up about seeing athletes, life. There is a life after your sports career ends. And I just want to see that transition well.
I think that's so fantastic just to hear you say that, because you said two words that just speak to my heart. And it's really serving and leading through serving, right?
Yes.
So you are, if I'm right, pastoring in the second most de-churched city in America.
Yes, that's right.
That's crazy, because I live in Milwaukee, and I see Milwaukee, I see Chicago, I see all the struggles that we have. And to me, Seattle seems like cozy, get a cup of coffee and smile.
Yeah.
Not the case, obviously. Tell us about what it's like in Seattle.
I love all people in all backgrounds, and I love the conversations, and I love going deep, and I love it when people can be honest and just share what their maybe disappointments are in life, or sometimes it's disappointments in who they thought God might be or what he might do. Sometimes it's disappointments in church. And I'll tell you, sadly, in a lot of churches, there can be real hurt. There might be hypocrisy, there might be dead religion, there might be a double life, and those scars run deep. And so a lot of people, this is what I've seen in the healing process in terms of de-churched, is when people can start to separate their experiences from the goodness of God, because it's all gets mixed in there. And then for the person who really mistreated them, let's say at church, or judged them harshly, they assume God hates them, and to separate that and say, okay, that person did that, and they're supposed to represent God, but that's not actually who God is. And to be able to kind of separate that and then open your heart back up to God's love, I just think at the end of the day, and this is my view, is that we all need love. And we need the self-love where we're not beating ourselves up, deflating ourselves. And we also need love from other people, and to let that love in. And we need love from above. And we need all three. And sometimes we try to get by in just one or just two, or we say, I hear people say a lot of time, all you need is self-love. If you have self-love, you have everything. Well, I'm loving myself, growing up, but like, that isn't going to really satisfy my deepest thirst if I just love myself or over focus on myself. And that's easy to do. So instead of that, what's the right balance? Love other people as you love yourself. So there it is. There's the kind of horizontal love in relationships, and then love from above, because I just looked around and thought, wait a second, all this beauty around us, and in Seattle, Pacific Northwest, you just see the lakes, the ocean, the trees, the mountains, all of it's right here. And this didn't get here by accident. When I walk into my kids' room in the morning, and there's this huge Lego like fort and planes and all of this stuff, I'm like, this didn't happen by accident overnight. You know, it wasn't like the ceiling fan was on and the Legos just tipped over and bumped into themselves and just formed all this. Like, no, there was intelligent design here. So those are all clues, I think. And deep down, I just seen a lot of healing, and taste and see that the Lord is good. You can't force it. Everyone makes their own choice. But I think if you love people and serve them, and then you're authentic, and hopefully with if it's done, it's genuine, and hopefully humble, it's passionate's okay. But if you go out and you just love people for who they are, and you listen, and people don't offend me if they say, I don't believe in Jesus, or I've never looked at it, I'm not interested in God, or whatever they say. I'm like, well, let's talk. And they say, I don't believe God exists. Well, let's just talk. Let's just create a safe space, an open space. And you know what? If we disagree on things, I'm going to love them. Like, let's have a close relationship. Just because we might see something a little different doesn't mean we have to cancel each other. Let's just keep walking through life and friendship and serve our community together and find the common ground.
And I just popped up a website that people can go to get more information about loving and serving others, and maybe some resources that they need. I'm going to cover that vocally in just a moment, but I want to talk about the loving and serving, especially within the community, because you're now working with the Seattle Sounders on their Faith and Family Nights, right, Jesse?
Yeah, that's right. Go Sounders.
So cool.
Big win last night. Of course, we won, a couple titles, and we get about 40 to 50,000 fans a game. So if people don't know, and they kind of think soccer is an upstart in Seattle, it's a soccer city. And my college coach, his son coaches University of Washington team, and they're ranked in the top 5. And so I still get to play in a men's league. I mean, there's a lot of soccer happening here, but Sounders Faith and Family is tremendous. I love it that the Sounders have that vision to bring in, a pastor, a player, and then also, when you think about so many teams praying before games, or just chaplains, and the important role in American sports at every level, on certainly every professional teams, on all professional teams, there's options for chaplaincy. And I think they're realizing that, we're more than just a physical body and intellectual mind. Like, there's more to our life than that. And when your soul, when the deep places are solid, are healthy, then that's going to pour out your relationship, your mindset, the way you play. It takes pressure off you. And I remember at Dartmouth, we just started to invite people in from different teams, and we started to pray before our games. And it was all something new, and I didn't always really know what I was doing, but it was like, there was something really good about it. We're like, when we come together and pray, different teams, different athletes coming together, there's a bond there. And I'm grateful that that's a value for the Sounders, but also just across the board, that option is there. We see it in the military too, right? So grateful people serving our country. And why are there chaplains? Because again, there's a need. And what's going on internal? See, in my life, there was the outside story and the inside story. The outside story was successful. The inside story was empty when I got to college. And I couldn't figure out, if I kept getting more achievement on the outside, well, wouldn't the inside just be great? And it just wasn't. There was that emptiness that wouldn't go away. So that emptiness is there. Don't just try and stuff it with things that can't satisfy it. Don't pretend like it's not there. Say, it's there. Now, what are my options? And that journey, that's exciting, because you're going to find that there's healing, there's satisfaction, there's fulfillment. And for me, it was looking up. I never thought that's where it would be. But, as part of the journey is that seeking.
And for our listeners, whether you're catching the live stream or whether you're listening to the podcast, we're all on a journey, and there's no shame in where we are, whether we're on top of the mountain or we're just digging our way up through the valley. So if you're looking for resources on your journey, I have completely endorsed Jesse's website, which is www.jessebradley.org. That's JESSEBRADLEY.org. Jesse, we're just about out of time. I want to ask you one very important question.
Yes.
Before I do that, real quick, what are some of the things that people will find on the website?
One thing they'll find is a link to all my socials, and I'd love to connect with anybody. So that's the best way to do it. Message me. But then there's also some resources on marriage, and there are some videos. There are some questions that strengthen your marriage. if you're interested in these spiritual topics, that's on there. There's a lot of stuff on there. There's videos on my YouTube channel. A lot of different topics are covered.
Thank you, Jesse. Like I said, we're just about out of time, but anybody who catches the show on a weekly basis knows I'm going to end with a very important question that's dear to my heart. Jesse, Legacy After the Locker Room, powered by Sports Philanthropy Network, is proud to support Special Olympics. I'm going to ask you, just like I've asked every guest with a 100% success rate, to make an autograph donation to Special Olympics. Can we count on you, Jesse?
Absolutely. I serve Special Olympics in a swimming event, and we have a top soccer program that's really wonderful in my community. Our family's been doing that. So this is a joy to be involved.
Any idea what you might autograph?
Maybe a soccer ball. That would be the obvious one. So I'll start there. How about that?
That would be so cool. I want to say thank you. What a streak. Every guest has said yes, and I'm so grateful because there's power in that. Jesse, we are out of time. Any last positive thoughts, words of wisdom from you as we start a new week?
Oh, thank you. I just so enjoyed being here right now. And for anyone involved in sports, enjoy it because it's truly a gift. And I want to say, looking back, it's the relationships that last. So if you have a bad practice or the game, didn't go how you want, or even if you win a championship, just keep knowing that what you're going to remember 10 years later, 20 years later is the relationship. So value the people that you're playing with.
Great advice. Again, my name is Kayla Bradham, your host of Legacy After the Locker Room podcast, with today's guest, former professional soccer goalie turned pastor, Jesse Bradley. Thank you, Jesse.
Thanks, Kayla. Appreciate it.